thanks for everybody that's here. Thanks to the panel for joining me. So my name is Ryan Edwards. I'm the founder and the CEO of a company called Audoo. We're a music technology company, and we are focusing on solving the gap of data into royalties for distribution to make sure that there is better transparency, better accuracy, and that payments flow even quicker to the artists, so you're paid correctly. We're joined by an expert panel. Esteemed panel, I should say, definitely more esteemed than myself. And I thought we'd get you all to introduce yourself. So Steve, shall we start with you, who you are?
Hi, hello folks, I'm Steve Sidwell. I'm a musician, I'm a composer, an arranger, conductor, producer, do things in music as well as I can.
Hi everyone, I'm Sean. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer at IMRO. We are a performing rights organisation based in Ireland, but with an increasingly international focus with members from 180 countries around the world. So we're really looking closely at the best ways to track royalties overseas.
Hello, I'm Lloyd-Davies. I was the former COO of Rocket Entertainment Group and currently the chairman of Rocket Sports, which probably has nothing to do with this kind of talk that we're going through. But anyway, lovely to be here. Thank you for having us.
I was just going to add, Sean and I were joking because we arrived in the green room slightly before you two. We feel slightly as underachievers. Steve has a Grammy. Luke has a, I nearly said Tony. It's not a Tony, is it?
An Emmy.
An Emmy.
Close,
so yeah, so maybe we'll repeat this next year, and Sean and I will get a Brit Award or something. We'll try and find a way to keep up with the company that we're in. So the first question really to all of you as a panel is, what is the biggest misconceptions that you think people have about how royalties work in general? Sean, you want to?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, if you leave aside the top 1% of artists out there, you'd be very surprised at how little mid-tier and emerging artists make in royalty income around the world. That makes it doubly important to be able to identify where, if your tracks are being played anywhere, that your society, your publisher, your label is tracking that for you, because collecting these royalties, it could be the difference between being able to fund your next tour or your next album. So, you know, there's only very, very few people making really, really big money here. I don't know if the panel agree with that or not, but you got to really, really mind your repertoire, chase down absolutely everything where it's been played in order to get paid, and a passive approach doesn't work.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. It's probably going to be annoying because we'll end up all agreeing on this. So at some point, I might just play devil's advocate. But no, I totally and utterly agree with that. I think that there is, and to talk about, I know someone's in the audience here from this company, but there's a fantastic company called Y Royalties out there that's part of CC Young & Co. They really champion this whole area. And I think one of the stats that I think is a really interesting takeaway is there's a margin of error of around 15% in terms of the distribution of these rights coming back to the artist that isn't being interpreted correctly from the data, which is, you know, if you're a big artist, that's a huge number. If you're a small artist, it's still a big number. It's all relative. So I think it's a massive problem that needs to be addressed, and I don't think it is being addressed properly. And I think it's obviously where Audoo is being one part of the sort of ecosystem that's trying to correct how that's working.
Completely. I mean, from my side, I was going to add, that's what's great. You know, you mentioned CC Young, who you kindly introduced me to a few years ago, and actually we've worked together. And it is, you hear the phrase ecosystem used a lot, and it is really important that, you know, everybody kind of knows everybody, and everybody can coexist and work together as well. Because sometimes you can, you know, somebody could say to us, well, actually, can you send that data to CCY so they can get into it directly and quicker rather than it go through, you know, multiple balances and checks as it goes. So yeah.
And to stress, this isn't an endorsement for that particular company. No. It's just saying they are one of the companies that's out there right at the forefront of looking at this stuff. I think so many people just trust the process that it's all fine. You'd have a lot of experience in this area, but you know, it needs to be. You need to not. I think don't trust the process. Be inquisitive. Look at this stuff. You do it in everyday life. You go out and check this stuff in your everyday life. Why wouldn't you look at this and see you are being recorded correctly?
Yeah, completely. I think there can definitely be a danger in music that artists are so focused on the art that actually they can often forget the business side of things. And you know, you do need to eat at the end of the month and pay the bills. And it's really important. Yeah, I can't think of another industry where somebody wouldn't, go and check their bank account if they've been paid correctly, or at least have some insight to how that kind of money kind of came through. So Steve, talking to you, you know, you're somebody who's had chart hits, musicals, global broadcasts, absolutely everything. Have you ever been surprised kind of where money has come from, where your work is generated, or maybe even not,
Yeah, I think probably more surprised where it doesn't come from sometimes. Okay. And I think touching on the point you guys are making, I think for artists and creatives, the whole process is quite difficult to understand when you've come at it from that angle and you're so focused on creating stuff. You don't really think about what's going to come back or how the best way to do that is. And I think it's difficult for artists, particularly emerging artists, young artists, to understand the whole process. Thinking about what I do, because I'm probably mostly known for arranging and being musical director for some big events, hopefully. And I guess with a company like Audoo, they're trying to distribute royalties fairly, whereas for someone like me, a smaller artist, if you like, small guy, if we're involved in a venue, there seems to be a blanket agreement or a venue agreement which pays a basic fee to PRS or one of the organisations, which then gets shared amongst the owners, the proportion of which would be, I guess, for the highest earning royalties, the highest royalty earners to get a bigger percentage of that than actually what's being accounted for. So for somebody like me, if it's my music there, it doesn't actually get logged in the way I feel it should, which is hopefully something that can change.
Of course. And I think, talking from experience, having, known Luke for a while, one of the first conversations we had, we were very lucky at Audoo that through Luke, Elton and David invested in the business. And one of the first things that Elton said was, I don't want the money that's not mine, which was really reassuring. He's very, very much about let's make sure we just get the money to the right people, and it's kind of been a consistent theme with Audoo. We've had some fantastic shareholders, household names who've come in and said, look, yes, I may have won, and great, that's very positive, but at the same time, we want to make sure that these people have careers, and I think Elton is probably the greatest example of somebody who has always championed young and up-and-coming talent, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, he's always championing young talent. It's really important to him. I mean, even now, I left the family office in January, but you can already see he's very vocal about it in the press, as you may or may not have seen. Well, Elton's always quite vocal.
He didn't hold back on the AI thing.
Yeah, he didn't hold back on calling the government. I think it was called the government losers. Yeah. Hopefully, there's no one from the government here. Well, David Cameron was previously here, wasn't he? Anyway, but yeah, he champions young artists and wants them to have the luxuries he's managed to create in his career, and that relies on getting things right, which you guys are doing. Of course.
So if we talk about data, again, Sean, you may take the lead on this. What do we think the risks are on assumptions and sample-based reporting when it comes to that over-distribution?
Yeah, like on a sample-based, I mean, if you're a niche catalog or you're not getting as many streams as the major artists, you risk not getting paid. So I mean, I think performing rights organizations, particularly around Europe, we're all trying to get more efficient in how we identify what music is actually being played. And that's where, audio recognition comes into it, because let's take the Irish market, for example. Like, we would license every business in Ireland who uses music, be it a hotel, a hairdresser, a doctor, a big retail store, and with the best will in the world, you're not going to be able to get those type of businesses to log every single track that they're performing. Their music isn't as crucial to the business as is a live music venue, for example, which would have to give you set lists as part of the license agreement. So using audio recognition by putting in boxes into those premises, which can actually identify in real time what music is being played, is really helping to get a more accurate picture of what that data is. And we've been able to start feeding that real data into our distributions to kind of increase the accuracies. Look, there's a balance to this as well. I mean, there's a cost involved in getting these things out, and most CMOs are performing rights organizations. We operate on a not-for-profit basis, so you have to strike that right balance between, ideally, you want to be reducing costs and increasing royalties, and it can be a tricky equilibrium to try and manage at the best of times.
Of course. So, and I think from our side, it's fascinating to see some of the music at the pop-ups. I think a story that I will take to my grave is we launched the business in Australia, and that was purely a COVID thing. Life looked quite normal there. And Bjorn Ulvaeus from ABBA, who'd invested, rang me just after launch. He said, "Hey, how's it all going?" "Oh, great." He said, "Have you spotted any ABBA songs?" And I naively we're on a Zoom, and I opened my laptop and I dialed in and I did a live demo, which, like, what is it, never work with children and animals. Well, the last performance that Ava had was Money, Money, Money in a strip club in Melbourne. So, Bjorn chuckled away at it, and it was, of course, really, really funny. But it does just show, I'm sure Bjorn is not sat there in Sweden thinking, I wonder how many strip clubs have played Money, Money, Money today or something else, kind of random like that. So, yeah. So always kind of fun to see any of those bits kind of coming through. So yeah, great. And then I guess, back to the point of a PRO's perspective, if there's an area of innovation that you could focus on the big difference for right holders right now, even outside what we're kind of talking about today, where is it you're focusing? Is it legacy? Is it?
Well, I think a lot of PROs at the moment, we're really trying to shorten the cycle between collecting the money and paying it out to the songwriter. So, the days of CMOs holding on to money for 12 to 18 months, it's not really acceptable anymore. So, like, we try and do most of our streams on a monthly basis, and a lot of other societies are moving to that. So, I mean, we see ourselves as custodians of the royalties on behalf of the creators, and it's no use to the creators if the money is sitting with us. We need to get the money in as efficiently as possible, get it out the door, don't be holding on to it for 12 to 18 months. And there's other areas, Ryan, where we're dabbling with in terms of innovation. So, the whole festival and live music sector, trying to get the old-fashioned way of getting set lists at a festival was to send a bunch of students around with a pass for the weekend with clipboards backstage to try and get set lists. And you would notice that by the end of the night, the quality of what you got back has been diminishing over time. The handwriting is harder to make out. So we're trialing this summer, audio recognition at a couple of festivals in Ireland, where the little device will plug into the sound desk and will match live, basically, the songs that are being performed. So, that's a nice example because it'll actually be more cost efficient for us. We won't have to pay those students. And we'll get the data richer, cleaner, much quicker. So with us anyway, once we have the data in place and the invoice is paid, we do the distribution 30 days after. So it's little things like that, Ryan. And even the digital service providers, your Spotify, Apple Music, and video on demand services, I have to say, those companies are very good with the data they provide. There can be bad press about streaming rates, etc., which isn't this panel. But in terms of the raw data that a lot of these companies provide, they give masses and masses of data. And I think we have a responsibility to be able to your point, kind of translate or make that data easy to understand for the creators. So, if it could be a case of putting it on a member portal, breaking it down by territory, by plan, it could help an artist or a creator figure out, well, where are they spiking around the world? Yeah. So it's trying to just use the data in a clever way, because there's so much of it out there. It's just about harnessing it in the right way, Of
course. And that actually leads me really, really nicely to the next question to Luke, which is, you've led some major global tours. I think Elson's last tour was the biggest ever. We won't mention a US female artist who
until Taylor Swift
took over the world. Yeah. Damn Taylor.
Damn Taylor.
But you've done brand partnerships, you've done content launches. When you as an artist team were looking at, I guess, some of that data to make decisions. Elton's relatively unique, right? He can announce a stadium anywhere in the world, and he's going to fill it. But what were the decisions? How were you thinking about approaching that? Be it brand partnerships, be it how you were doing it. What was the data you were enhancing?
I mean, I can talk about certain things, but we came up with a sort of 5-year strategy. It's slightly off topic, but it's interesting. We came up with a 5-year strategy, which David Furnish did brilliantly and created this strategy of where we were going to tour, but a lot of this was about all the sort of underlying IP of how we would exploit Elton John and his brand and so on. And, a lot of it was getting involved in a lot of the royalty streams, having a greater understanding of how that works and so on, so that we could start building things around each of these different line items they had. And so really just trying to enact the strategy, but it was around an overarching global farewell tour, which hopefully some of you came to. If not, it's too late. But they did 331 shows. But we just got a really good understanding of his data and his fan base, and I think that was really important for us. But also, I think we did start to recognize, like a lot of artists of that stature perhaps realize, that you rely on these partners you have in the industry, and I won't name them, to be providing you with accurate data. And sometimes it isn't as accurate as you might think. And so that's why I think it's really important to be inquisitive about it. And thankfully, we were guided in the right way by one of the people that was working with us in that regard. So, it was a fascinating journey, but we started to be really inquisitive about the brand, and we started to be very inquisitive about all the royalty streams and so on, which was super important to us.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And I guess you saw that across all the artists across Rocket as well, because, everybody naturally associates Elton with Rocket, but, you've got artists of all different sizes that you could harness that in different ways.
100%. Well. I mean, that was something we were very keen to work with. I think we became more sophisticated as time went on. I think because we were relying on the model like we all started off at the beginning, that you just expect it to be revenue streams that come in. But you've got to be, I keep using that word, inquisitive, you've got to question it. I mean, I don't know what you think. You're probably all experts in here. This chap certainly is. But it's flipping complicated. Let's be honest. The amount of acronyms that come up and all the different, public PROs and so on. Sorry, was that someone dying?
It was a whoop. No,
it was a whoop. Well, I hope there's a woo of agreement rather than woo get off. But it's really complicated. And I sat down with this particular gentleman and I said, there's a great film called Margin Call. I don't know if any of you have seen it. But there's Jeremy Irons' character says, just explain it to me like I'm a Labrador or a 4-year-old child. And he did. And I found that quite fascinating. I think a lot of probably music executives, and maybe I'm wrong in this space, maybe it's only just me, they don't say anything, or they don't ask, do you know what, I don't get that at all. I have no idea what you're talking about. And how does that work? And how much money do I get for a stream? And I've known certain artists that when they've asked their label or their whoever is their music producer, how much money do I make from a stream? Or they start inquiring, they just send them another check, keep them quiet. And I think that's something that's quite worrying and needs to be examined thoroughly.
And as you were talking, I think, because obviously you with Rocket you had sport as well.
Yeah.
Do you feel sport is more advanced than music? Do you see kind of different mythologies? Is the data as messy because there's brand deals and there's all these different things? Just out of intrigue.
I'm trying to think of some of the parallels. Well, I think in America in general, they're more sophisticated than in Europe and the UK. I think the UK, I mean, this is, again, getting off topic, but anyway, what hell. I think the UK and Europe is about 5 to 10 years behind America in terms of the entertainment space.
Okay.
That's my general statement. I would come out
Interesting.
happy to be challenged on that. But I think that's great because I think there are loads of opportunities in the UK and Europe as a consequence.
Cool.
But you look at the way a lot of these places in America run their entertainment franchises, I think they just look at a flywheel effect, and I think a lot more people in the entertainment industry could look at a flywheel effect that they could build around their own IP and their own artist.
Interesting.
And you should, if you're a young artist, and I hope there's somebody in here that is a young artist, I think you should start thinking about that right at the beginning of your career.
Interesting. Yeah, thank you. So
prepare for your success, basically.
I mean, the good news in sport, I get to tease Steve now. We may be behind, but Tottenham have finally won a trophy, which I know he's very, very happy about. So it only took 20 years. It only took nearly half of my lifetime. So yeah, if there's any Tottenham or Arsenal fans in, I think Cesc Fabregas was our warm-up now, wasn't he, Steve? So we were going to tease Cesc, but we'll leave him to it on that one. So yeah, I'm conscious of time. I'm really sorry we're not allowed to take questions. We would love to take your question. I'm sure you can grab us after, but we were given very strict instructions.
There's a big guy behind.
Yeah, there could be a
sniper,
and it really.
He's the one that came on and introduced us, and gave us a very stern warning.
Yeah.
With a smile.
But I'm sure come and grab us after. I guess with kind of the time that we've got left, it's really a final thoughts about, this is very much about focus on your royalty streams, for artists, for producers, for every part of the industry, how they maximize their revenues, how they know that their money is flowing through to. So is there any tip that you have seen, I guess, as an artist, as a PRO, working with, huge membership base and saw all different sizes and working with some of the biggest artists on the planet, and then some of those up-and-coming ones that you've championed? Yeah, what would your final thought be or recommendation to the room? Particularly that young artist, Luke, if there's one here. Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, Ryan, and it touches on what you were saying, Luke. If for a young artist, I think you should be treating your career as a business from day one, and this is a hustle. you may be talking to a publisher, you may be talking to a label or your PRO, but you need to be on them. And I know it's not a glamorous thing. You want to be focused on creating.
Yeah.
But the money is not going to come in by itself. So you need to be pushing, you need to be querying, you need to be checking, you need to be on top of this stuff, because, you know, if your songs aren't identified and money is collected, the money goes to other people, as we discussed at the start. So, you know, I'm not sure if there are many artists in the room, but at the very least, like, once you create a song and you pump it out there on any platform, have it registered with your PRO. I mean, most PROs are pretty good at registering the songs. Get it registered, get it in the system. What we're trying to do is get your sound files off you as well. So if you have your raw audio, give that to us, and then we'll make sure the likes of Ryan's company or others out there, such as SoundMouse, BMAT, have those audio files, because most companies like that, they will do deals with major labels or whatever, your big rights holders, to get the big catalog. But if you're not in that, you know, how is your stuff going to get matched by audio recognition if nobody has the sound file? So it's that kind of stuff. Yeah, it's just, don't be passive. It doesn't come in by itself. And use, like, if you sign up to a PRO, hassle them. They have membership departments, customer services departments. They're there to work on your behalf. At the end of the day, a lot of execs in the industry, we're all just middle people. Do you know what I mean? We're just trying to help to get you the money, and, you know, use those services that are available to you, because as I said, it doesn't come in by itself.
Cool. Luke, Steve?
Yeah, I think for young artists, not being afraid to ask the questions is quite important. I think it's quite an intimidating thing to be invited into this world where they're creating and their content's going to be out there, and then asking for the money. You know, it's kind of, it doesn't really hold well with a lot of performers. Slightly off subject, but I teach at a few universities around Europe, and part of my course I teach arranging, and I also add in what I call music business etiquette, because these colleges are turning out, and universities, amazing musicians, amazing players, but they're then entering a business, and I often feel they're not prepared to go from being a fantastic talent to how to make a living. It's two very different things. So I know that's slightly off subject. It's the same kind of thing that somebody should be educating people when they have a chance to make a career and make it the success that they deserve. Make sure they get what's due to them.
Used to have this phrase that Elton used to say quite a lot, was that when you create a song, it's like it's your child and your baby, and you're very protective of it. Now, I'm not an artist. I'm not a musician. I can't. Well, I could try and sing, but not very good at it. But he, you know, would say he would create these musicians. I can't do that. A lot of people can't do it. And so he was incredibly protective of these things. But, you know, once you release them, they are like a child. They're like a son or a daughter to you, and they mean something to you, even if they're not received well. But you wouldn't send your son or your daughter out into the world and not look after them and not be inquisitive about that. And so I think that's one of the things I'd say is super important, is to just, like you said, write to your PROs, actually challenge them, try and understand more about where this all comes from. So particularly as the world's moving in such a fast pace, particularly in the world of immersive space, which I'm sure there's been some talks around the immersive space, I think things are moving in so many different directions, but an artist is it all comes back to the artist and that creative IP.
And I think the value of music is increasing all the time. So, you know, I've told this story a lot of times. So my you know, I was artist when I was younger. Something didn't work out, and then I've had a fresh career mainly in financial services. And when I started Audoo 6 years ago, I had a shareholder who was invested into a fintech business that I work for. And, you know, I went to him, and, you know, as I did with a few, and said, hey, I've got this idea, will you back me, etc. And he said to me, he said, look, I'll back you, because we've just worked together for the last few years. He said, I think you're impressive, and I like you. He said, so 100%. He said, but I don't get it. He said, I don't get this music thing, right? And almost for probably the first 18 months, I also get like a monthly WhatsApp from him that said, hey, have I lost the money yet? Can I write it off yet? I want to put it off on my tax return. And then all of a sudden, there was this little, well, I say little, you know, business with an upside-down elephant called Hypnosis, who started buying music rights. And, you know, this guy's an investment banker. And it went from, you know, them starting to buy music rights, Shakira being on the front page of the Financial Times, having sold her catalogue for millions, if not tens of millions of pounds. And the messages all of a sudden went from, there might be something in this. That's really, really valuable, right? That's really good. And I think even in the own journey, at Audoo over the last kind of 5 or 6 years, we've seen this explosion in, private equity is very, very serious business. These guys do not place billions, and I'm talking billions upon billions of pounds, dollars, whichever currency you want to talk to, into an asset that they don't think they can track, they don't think they can make money on, and they don't think they can, in traditional marketing terms, I guess, sweat an asset.
And believe me, Ryan, those companies are hassling the PROs and the people who they bought the records off, or the royalties from, or the rights from. And so you as a creator should adopt that same mindset.
Completely.
Those big funds, they want answers. It's like, well, you're due to pay me in May. Why can't you just pay me in March? And do you know what I mean? They want their return quicker, and creators should get that as well. They should be provided with that type of service. It doesn't matter how small you are. Particularly PRO, if you're a member of a PRO, you're just an equal member, as equal as the bigger guys. They work on your behalf. You assign your rights to them. So don't be shy or don't be intimidated in asking them for assistance, or they have your rights. They're accountable to answer for you. So, just as you said, don't be shy about it.
Yeah, so it's funny, as you said, go and talk to your PRO membership. I smiled because I saw Tony from PRS, head of membership, out the corner of my eye. So I was thinking, if anybody needs to get to PRS, Tony's in the room. So, but that's it. And again, from experience from all the artists that we see, when you say to them, "Hey, do you see your PRO?" And some of the ones that go, "No, I never hear from them." You go, "Cool. Have you ever called them? Have you ever dropped them a message?" And they go, "No." Okay, cool. So you're one of tens of thousands or potentially hundreds of thousands. They've got a lot that are coming to them and asking for the help. So that's where they're going to spend it, because they know that they're asking for help and they should get that help in kind of return.
I know we've got only 1 minute, 19 seconds,
Yeah.
but it's slightly freaky being back in this room, because Elton John's been in this room. And I was telling the lads here earlier about this. A while ago, probably nearly 20 years ago, we had his 60th birthday party here with Sam Taylor Johnson, who you probably know as the film director. And I think I'm trying to get my bearings on the room, but I'm pretty sure that I know it was Barbara Windsor, if you remember Babs, she jumped out of a cake, I think, where you are literally sitting. So it's kind of weird being back here 20 years on a stage talking about music royalties, and then 20 years ago, Barbara Windsor was coming out of a cake here where you're sat. Hallowed turf.
I say we're not going to ask for a repeat. Maybe we will. So I think with a few seconds left to go, just to say thank you to you all. Maybe a quick fire question. It's if there was a favourite album, favourite artist that could be new or of the last decade or few decades, what would your recommendation to the room? What album would you tell them to go and listen to, or song would you tell them to get right now? Sean, go on, yeah.
There was a band played last night at the British Embassy stage, the Couriers. They're from Dublin, post-punk, really, really good. So they're my recommendation. kept that in there. I
don't know. Can I do my favourite Elton John song instead?
Go on then, yeah.
Mona Lisa's and Mad Hatters. Okay. I do love the Mumford & Sons. I think they're great. They're coming back this year anyway, aren't they? Cool. Anyway, I'd probably come with a better answer with more time.
There's too many, but seeing as you're off to Nashville tomorrow.
Yeah.
I was there last year. There was a band called the Time Jumpers, which I'm fairly obsessed with, who are the great and good of the studio musicians who get together every Monday night and play in Nashville. And if you're ever there on a Monday, it's just something extraordinary.
Gotta go.
It's wonderful.
Well, mine would be, the very final thought would be, I was at South by in Austin last year, and it was a band called Lottery Winners, so Northern band, and they were just massive personality, huge. I think they're on tour with Robbie Williams at the moment, and when I saw them, I think there were genuinely about 8 people in the room. They played an extra gig, and they'd had a really bad time because they were really starting to blow up, and because their Instagram handle was Lottery Winners, they got a massive fan base, and Meta had taken it down because they thought it was like lottery spamming. So they'd lost their entire fan base. So the poor guys had lost all their way to marketing them, but they've built up. I think they've had 2 #1 albums now, and they are just really fun artists to watch. So yeah, thank you for your time, guys. Thank you
very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Good. Thank you.